Sign the papers, old man, or I'll make sure you never see your daughter again, Pike said, sliding the documents across my kitchen table. $2.3 million. My entire life's work, about to disappear with one signature. And my own daughter sitting there, believing every lie he'd fed her about my failing mind. But what Pike didn't know was that I'd been waiting for this exact moment for 6 months, and by tomorrow, he'd be the one losing everything while the whole town watched. But let me take you back to where this all started. The morning that eviction notice arrived, giving me 30 days to get out of the house I'd built with my own hands. Before we continue, I request that you please let me know where you are watching from. It helps me know how far my stories are reaching. Now, let's get back to today's story. The eviction notice trembled in my weathered hands as I read it for the third time. 30 days. After 42 years in this house, after burying my beloved Margaret just 6 months ago, I had 30 days. Dad, you know this is for the best. My daughter Violet stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, avoiding my eyes. The apartment above the hardware store is perfect for someone your age. 1 bedroom, no stairs to worry about. No stairs to worry about. My voice cracked. This is my house, Violet. Your mother and I. Mom's gone. The words hit like a slap. Violet's husband Pike stepped up behind her, his hand possessive on her shoulder. And frankly, Mr. Whitmore, this place is too much for you now. The property taxes alone are eating into Violet's inheritance. I studied my son-in-law's face, that smooth, practiced expression Pike wore when he was moving chess pieces nobody else could see. What most people didn't know about me was that I'd been playing chess a lot longer than Pike had been breathing. The apartment comes furnished, Violet continued, her voice softening slightly. And it's only $600 a month. You can afford that on Social Security. I looked around the living room where Margaret and I had watched our daughter take her first steps, where we'd hosted Christmas mornings and birthday parties, where we'd held each other through the darkest nights of her cancer treatment. Now Pike was calculating square footage with his eyes, probably already picking out paint colors. I built this house with my own hands, I said quietly. Every beam, every nail, every piece of trim work. Margaret picked out the colors for each room, which is exactly why it needs so much work now. Pike's interruption was surgical, precise. The foundation has settling issues, the roof needs replacement, and don't get me started on that ancient electrical system. Violet could spend $50,000 just making it livable. Violet winced. She knew as well as I did that Pike was preparing to flip this place the moment I was gone. I'd watched him drive through the neighborhood with that calculating look, photographing houses, taking notes about lot sizes and improvement potential. But here's what they didn't know. Margaret and I had been preparing for this conversation for 2 years before she died. We'd seen how Pike looked at the house, the neighborhood, the land. We'd watched him change Violet, piece by piece, from the generous girl who used to bring me soup when I was sick to this stranger who couldn't meet my eyes. When do I have to decide? I asked, letting just a hint of confusion creep into my voice. You don't, Pike said, sliding a thick envelope across the coffee table. We've already handled everything. The lease on the apartment starts next month. We've arranged for movers. I opened the envelope with hands that shook just enough to sell the performance. Inside were lease papers, moving contracts, and a property transfer deed that made my blood run cold. Somehow, Pike had managed to get Violet to sign over power of attorney for my affairs. You can't do this, I whispered. Actually, we can. Pike's smile was all teeth, no warmth. Violet has been handling your finances since Margaret's funeral, remember? When you were too grief-stricken to think straight. The bank statements show some concerning patterns. Missed payments, double payments, confusion about basic transactions. I remembered those months. I remembered Pike volunteering to help Violet manage my bills while I grieved. I remembered him being so understanding about my confusion, so patient with my forgetfulness. He'd even suggested that maybe I shouldn't be handling money at all during such a difficult time. I was grieving my wife of 45 years. Of course you were, Violet said quickly, but her voice had that rehearsed quality that told me Pike had coached her on what to say. And that's exactly why this makes sense. You need someone looking out for you now. Looking out for me. Right. I studied the papers more carefully, letting them think I was just a confused old man trying to understand legal jargon. But what I was really doing was memorizing every detail, every signature, every date. Because there was something Pike didn't know about those concerning patterns in my bank statements. They weren't confusion. They were breadcrumbs. I suppose I don't have a choice, I said finally, my voice hollow with defeat. You'll love the apartment, Dad. It has a nice view of Main Street, and you'll be right in the middle of everything. Right in the middle of everything. That part, at least, was true. Can I at least take Margaret's rocking chair? And her jewelry box? Pike and Violet exchanged a look. The chair won't fit, Pike said. And honestly, Violet should have her mother's jewelry. It's more appropriate. Margaret's jewelry box. The one with our wedding photos, her grandmother's rings, and 40 years of anniversary gifts. Gone. Of course, I said quietly. Violet should have it. 3 weeks later, I was loading the last box of Margaret's china into the back of Pike's truck. He'd insisted on handling the move personally, probably to make sure I didn't take anything he considered valuable. Careful with that, I said as he hefted a box marked Margaret's books. It's just old romance novels, Pike scoffed. We can donate them. Those books meant everything to her. Everything she collected is going into storage, Violet said, not looking at me. Until we figure out what to do with it all. Until they figured out what to sell, she meant. My new apartment was exactly as advertised. Small, functional, and depressing. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, a living room that could barely fit a couch and television. The walls were thin enough that I could hear every footstep from the neighbors, every truck rumbling down Main Street. See? Perfect for you, Pike said, setting down the last box. Everything you need, nothing you don't. After they left, I sat in the single chair they'd allowed me to keep and looked around my new prison. Through the window, I could see my house, just 3 blocks away. Pike had already brought in contractors. I could see their trucks in the driveway. The first night was the hardest. Without Margaret's presence, without the familiar creaks and sounds of home, I felt truly alone for the first time in my life. I understood then why so many widowers didn't last long after their wives. It wasn't just the loneliness. It was the complete erasure of the life you'd built together. But I wasn't just any widower. I was Ezra Whitmore, and I'd been planning this chess match longer than Pike realized. The next morning, I walked to the Copper Creek Community Bank, the same bank where I'd done business for 37 years. Mildred Hawthorne was behind the counter, same as always. Morning, Ezra. How are you settling in? As well as can be expected, I said. I need to make a withdrawal. Of course. How much? $50. I paused, letting confusion cross my face. No, wait. I need to pay rent. What's 600 times 12? Mildred's expression softened with sympathy. 7,200, honey. Right. 7,000 then. I fumbled with my wallet. My mind isn't what it used to be since Margaret passed. I understand completely. My Harold was the same way after his Dolores died. She processed the withdrawal with practiced efficiency. Are you taking care of yourself? Eating enough? Pike and Violet check on me. I lied smoothly. They're very attentive. Word would be all over Copper Creek by noon that Ezra Whitmore was struggling more than anyone realized, which was exactly what I needed. Over the next month, I established a routine. Every morning, I walked Main Street, stopping to chat with shopkeepers who'd known me for decades. I'd mention small confusions, forgetting where I parked. I didn't have a car anymore, losing my keys. They were in my pocket, struggling with the new apartment's locks. It's so different from the house, I'd tell Bonnie at the diner. Margaret always handled the bills there. Everything's so complicated now. Oh, Ezra. I'm sure Violet is helping. When she can. Pike keeps her so busy with his business ventures. That was true enough. Pike had expanded from his small construction company to buying and flipping houses all over the county. He was leveraging Violet's inheritance, Margaret's life insurance money, to finance increasingly ambitious projects. What Pike didn't know was that I'd been watching those projects very carefully. The first sympathy shift came 6 weeks after my move. I was having coffee at the diner when I overheard 2 women at the next table. Did you see what Pike Brennan did to the Morrison place? That beautiful Victorian? What happened? Gutted it completely. Took out all the original woodwork, the stained glass windows, everything that made it special. Now it looks like every other flipped house in town. That's criminal. Those details were irreplaceable. Tell me about it. And the price he's asking? 3 times what old Mrs. Morrison sold it for. No family in Copper Creek can afford that now. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was taking notes. The Morrison place had been a landmark for 60 years. Pike had destroyed it for profit, and people were starting to notice. At least he's keeping the money in the family. One of the women continued. I heard Violet's father is living in that tiny apartment above Henderson's hardware now. Poor man lost everything when his wife died. Pike took his house. Violet inherited it, technically. But you know how these things go? The old man probably doesn't even understand what happened. I sipped my coffee and let them think exactly that. That afternoon, I was shuffling home when I saw Violet coming out of the bank. She looked tired, stressed, older than her 38 years. Dad, how are you doing? Oh, you know, getting by. I gestured toward my apartment building. It's an adjustment. Are you eating enough? You look thin. I cook sometimes. Margaret always did most of that. I let my voice trail off wistfully. How are you, sweetheart? You look tired. Just busy. Pike has several projects going, and the financing is. She stopped herself. I'm fine. If you ever need anything, you know I'm here. She looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I saw my little girl again, the one who used to climb into my lap when thunderstorms scared her. I know, Dad. I love you. I love you too, Violet. No matter what. After she left, I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, watching her drive away in Pike's expensive truck. Because what I'd seen in her face wasn't just stress about money. It was fear. And that told me Pike's house of cards was already starting to wobble. The second sympathy shift happened 2 months later, during the first real cold snap of winter. I was at the post office when Violet rushed in, her face flushed with panic. Dad, thank God you're here. I've been calling and calling. Calling? I don't think. Your phone's been disconnected, she said, checking her own phone frantically. I've been trying to reach you all morning. Are you okay? I blinked in confusion. Disconnected? But I paid the bill. When? How much did you pay? Last week. Or maybe. I frowned, letting uncertainty cloud my features. Violet, I think I might have paid it twice. Or not at all. I can't remember. Her face went pale. Dad, show me your checkbook. I fumbled through my jacket pockets, pulling out a worn checkbook with several entries in shaky handwriting. Violet flipped through it, her expression growing more alarmed with each page. Dad, you wrote 3 checks to the phone company last month, and 2 to the electric company. And what's this charge for $800 to? Henderson's Market. Groceries. $800 in groceries. I looked genuinely confused because part of me was genuinely confused about why she was so upset. After all, every one of those confused payments had a very specific purpose. Maybe I should help you with your bills, Violet said quietly. Pike already does that, doesn't he? Pike handles the rent payments from your account to mine. But your other expenses. She closed the checkbook gently. Dad, I think you might be having more trouble than we realized. That afternoon, Violet came to my apartment with a folder full of paperwork. I've talked to Pike, and we think it would be better if I handle all your finances directly. Just temporarily, until you get settled. I signed the papers with hands that trembled slightly. What Violet didn't know was that every confused payment I'd made had been carefully documented, photographed, and stored in a safety deposit box she didn't know existed. What she also didn't know was that her husband had been skimming money from my accounts for months. This is for your own good, Dad. I know, sweetheart. I trust you. But even as I said it, I could see the guilt in her eyes. She knew something wasn't right about what they were doing to me, but Pike had convinced her it was necessary. That evening, I called my oldest friend in town, Bill Henderson, who owned the hardware store where I bought my supplies for 40 years. Bill, it's Ezra. I'm having some trouble with my phone bill, and I wondered if you could help me understand something. Of course, Ezra. What's going on? Well, I thought I paid it, but apparently I didn't. Or maybe I paid it too much. I'm getting confused about these things. There was a pause. Ezra, are you doing okay over there? We've been worried about you. Oh, you know how it is. Getting old isn't for sissies, as Margaret used to say. If you need anything, groceries, rides to appointments, anything at all, you just call me, okay? Thank you, Bill. That means more than you know. After I hung up, I sat in my tiny living room and smiled. By tomorrow, word would be all over town that Ezra Whitmore was struggling with basic tasks like paying bills, which was exactly what I needed Pike to hear. The third sympathy shift was the cruelest, and it came just before Thanksgiving. I was walking past my old house, something I did every few days, just to see the progress on Pike's renovations, when I saw him loading furniture into a truck. My furniture. Margaret's rocking chair, the one where she'd nursed Violet as a baby. The dining room table where we'd hosted every holiday meal for 20 years. The cedar chest her grandfather had built by hand. "Pike," I called out, hurrying across the street as fast as my 78-year-old legs could manage. He looked up with that practiced smile. "Oh, hey there, Ezra. Just clearing out some of the old stuff." "That's Margaret's chair." I know. But honestly, where would you put it in the apartment? It's way too big, and the upholstery is completely shot." She rocked Violet to sleep in that chair. "Which is exactly why we're donating it to the church. Some other family will get good use out of it." I stood there watching him load my life into a truck, and for a moment, my performance became reality. The grief, the helplessness, the rage, it all crashed over me like a wave. "At least let me keep the cedar chest. It has her quilts in it. Ezra, you've got to start thinking practically. You can't hold on to everything." Pike's voice was patient, condescending, the tone you'd use with a confused child. "Violet picked out the most important pieces for you. Everything else is just taking up space. Taking up space in my own house." "Your former house," Pike corrected gently. "This is Violet's house now. And honestly, the sooner you accept that, the easier this transition will be for everyone." I watched them load Margaret's hope chest into the truck and felt something inside me crystallize into pure, cold determination. "Pike, can I ask you something?" "Sure. When you and Violet got married, did you love her? Really love her?" Pike's smile faltered for just a moment. "Of course I did." "I do. Then why does she look so scared all the time now?" "Scared? Violet's not scared. She's just stressed about making sure you're taken care of." "Is that what you call it?" Pike's mask slipped slightly, and I caught a glimpse of the calculating predator underneath. "Ezra, I think the confusion is getting worse. Maybe we should talk to Dr. Peterson about increasing your medication." "I'm not taking any medication." "Maybe you should be." That night, I called my lawyer. "Malcolm? It's Ezra Whitmore." "Ezra, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. How are you holding up?" Malcolm Steele had been Margaret's and my attorney for 15 years. He'd handled our wills, our estate planning, and most importantly, he'd helped us set up certain contingencies that Violet and Pike knew nothing about. "It's time, Malcolm. You're sure? Once we start this, there's no going back." I thought about Margaret's rocking chair disappearing into Pike's truck. I thought about my daughter's frightened face every time I saw her now. I thought about the house I'd built with my own hands being gutted and flipped for profit. "I'm sure." "All right then. I'll need you to come in tomorrow morning. And Ezra, you're going to need to be ready for what comes next. When people find out what you've been hiding, it's going to change everything." "Good," I said. "It's time for everything to change." The next morning, I sat in Malcolm's office while he spread documents across his mahogany desk. To anyone watching, I looked like a confused old man trying to understand complex legal matters. But what I was really doing was reviewing the most carefully constructed plan of my life. "Let's go through this one more time," Malcolm said. "Just to make sure you understand the implications." "I understand perfectly. The trust fund you and Margaret established is worth how much?" $2.3 million. And currently, the only people who know about its existence are you, me, and Margaret. God rest her soul. The conditions for its release are that I be deemed mentally incompetent to manage my own affairs, or that I die, whichever comes first. Malcolm nodded. "And Pike has been working very hard to establish the first condition." "With my help," I said grimly. "For 6 months, I'd been playing the part of a declining old man. Every confused payment, every missed appointment, every moment of supposed bewilderment had been carefully calculated to build a case that I was losing my mental faculties. Pike had been documenting everything, of course. He'd been building a file to support a competency hearing that would give him and Violet complete control over my affairs. What he didn't know was that I'd been building a file too. "The beauty of Pike's plan," Malcolm continued, "is that he thinks he's discovered a hidden asset. Your house was just the beginning. He's been going through your financial records, looking for anything else he can get his hands on. And when he finds the trust, he'll petition the court to have you declared incompetent based on all the evidence of your declining mental state. Evidence that you've been helpfully providing for months." I smiled, thinking of all the times Pike had helped me with paperwork, all the confused phone calls I'd made that he'd overheard, all the bills I'd paid wrong while he was watching. "But here's what he doesn't understand," Malcolm said, pulling out another set of documents. "The trust isn't just any trust. It's a discretionary trust with some very specific conditions. Meaning that when you're declared incompetent, control of the trust doesn't automatically go to your next of kin. It goes to the trustees that you and Margaret appointed, which are myself, as your attorney, and Judge Harrison, as an independent party. Judge Harrison had been Margaret's and my friend for 30 years. He'd also been watching Pike's activities in Copper Creek with growing concern. And our job as trustees is to determine whether the trust's assets should be released to your daughter, based on whether we believe it's in your best interests and whether she's demonstrated the character and judgment necessary to handle such a responsibility. I thought about Margaret's rocking chair in the back of Pike's truck. What have you observed about my daughter's character lately, Malcolm? That's exactly the question Judge Harrison and I will be asking. Malcolm pulled out a thick folder I'd never seen before. What's that? Evidence. Photographs of the historic homes Pike has destroyed. Financial records showing how he's been using Violet's inheritance as collateral for increasingly risky investments. Testimonies from contractors who've had to take him to court for non-payment. Bank records showing the money he's been skimming from your accounts. My mouth fell open. You've been investigating him? Ezra, Margaret asked me to keep an eye on Pike 2 years before she died. She was worried about Violet, about the changes she was seeing in her daughter. So yes, I've been investigating him. And what I've found. Malcolm shook his head. Your daughter is married to a man who's been systematically isolating her from her support system, manipulating her decisions, and using her emotions against her. In legal terms, Pike Brennan is a financial predator. And Violet is a victim. But she's also an adult who's made some very poor decisions that have hurt you badly. The question is whether she's redeemable. I stared out Malcolm's office window at the town where I'd lived my entire adult life. In 6 months, everything had changed. My wife was dead. My home was gone. My daughter barely spoke to me. And everyone in town thought I was a confused old man losing his grip on reality. But I wasn't confused. I was furious. There's something else, Malcolm said quietly. Something I haven't told you yet. What? Pike's been embezzling from his construction company. The partners don't know it yet, but he's been using client deposits to fund his house-flipping ventures. When they find out, and they will, he's going to face criminal charges. When will they find out? Malcolm smiled. That depends on when certain financial records get anonymously mailed to the right people. I looked at my old friend and lawyer, this man who'd helped Margaret and me plan for our retirement, our deaths, and apparently our daughter's potential betrayal. How long have you been planning this? Since Margaret got her diagnosis. She knew she was dying, Ezra, and she knew that when she was gone, Pike would make his move. So we started preparing. I felt tears sting my eyes for the first time since Margaret's funeral. She'd been protecting me even from her deathbed. What do I need to do? Keep playing the confused old man for a few more weeks. Pike's almost ready to file the competency petition. I can feel it. And when he does, that's when we spring the trap. And Violet. That depends on Violet. When she finds out what her husband has been doing, she'll have a choice. Stand by the man who's been manipulating her, or choose her father. I stood up to leave, then turned back. Malcolm, what if she chooses Pike? Then she loses everything. The trust, the house, whatever relationship she might have salvaged with you. Pike will go to prison for embezzlement, and she'll be left with nothing but the debt he's accumulated in her name. And if she chooses me, then maybe we can save your daughter before it's too late. 2 weeks later, Pike made his move. I was having breakfast at the diner when Violet walked in, her face pale and her hands shaking. Dad, we need to talk. Of course, sweetheart. Sit down. She slid into the booth across from me, looking around nervously. Not here. Can we go to your apartment? 20 minutes later, we were sitting in my tiny living room, Violet clutching a manila folder like it contained something dangerous. Dad, I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be honest with me. I'm always honest with you. Are there any accounts that you haven't told us about? Any investments or savings that Pike and I don't know about? I let confusion cross my face. Accounts? I don't. What do you mean? Dad, Pike found some paperwork in the house. References to something called the Whitmore Family Trust. Do you know what that is? I blinked slowly, as if trying to remember something just out of reach. Trust? Margaret and I talked to Malcolm about trusts, I think. For taxes or something. I don't really understand that stuff. This trust has over $2 million in it, Dad. I let my mouth fall open in genuine surprise. Not because of the trust. I'd known about that for years, but because Pike had actually found it. 2 million? That can't be right. The paperwork says it was funded with the proceeds from the sale of your father's ranch, plus 40 years of investments that Margaret managed. Margaret had indeed managed our investments. She'd been brilliant with money, turning my father's small cattle ranch into a substantial nest egg through careful planning and compound growth. I don't understand any of this, I said helplessly. Dad, if this is real, it changes everything. You're not poor. You're not dependent on us. You never were. I watched my daughter's face as the implications sank in. If I had money, real money, then everything Pike had done had been unnecessary. The eviction, the apartment, the control over my finances, all of it. But I don't have access to that money, I said. Do I? According to this, the trust only releases funds if you're declared mentally incompetent or if you die. And Pike thinks we should petition the court to declare me incompetent. For your own protection, Dad. If you can't manage your affairs, and there's this much money at stake. I saw it then, the moment Pike's manipulation crystallized into action. He'd convinced my daughter that stealing my dignity was actually helping me. What do you think, Violet? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. I think I've made some terrible mistakes, she whispered finally. What kind of mistakes? I let Pike convince me that you were becoming senile. I let him talk me into taking your house. I've been treating you like a child instead of my father. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. And now I find out that you never needed our help at all. That everything we've done has been, what, sweetheart? Cruel. We've been cruel to you, Dad. And I can't figure out if Pike actually believes he's helping, or if he's been planning this all along. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. The moment my daughter started to see through the fog of Pike's influence. What does Pike want to do with the trust money? He says we should use it to secure your care, better living arrangements, maybe a nice assisted living facility. And any remaining funds could help pay for our future, our children's education. Our children. Pike was already spending money that didn't exist on children they didn't have. And what do you want to do? Violet looked up at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in months. My daughter seeing me as a person instead of a problem to be managed. I want to give you your house back, she said. I want to apologize for the last 6 months and try to figure out how to make it right. And Pike. She took a shaky breath. Pike is going to be very angry. That evening, Pike came to my apartment. He didn't knock. We need to talk, old man. I looked up from the book I was pretending to read, one of Margaret's romance novels that I'd rescued from the donation pile. Pike, come in, I guess. Cut the confused act. Violet told me what you two talked about. I set the book down carefully. I'm not sure what you mean. The trust fund, Ezra. The $2 million you've been hiding while living off our charity. I haven't been hiding anything. I don't really understand. Pike crossed the room in 2 steps and grabbed my shirt, pulling me up from my chair. I said, cut the act. You think you're clever? You think you've been playing some kind of game? Pike, you're scaring me. Good. Because here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, we're going to Malcolm Steele's office. You're going to sign papers giving Violet power of attorney over all your affairs, including that trust. And if you don't, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you really are. What kind of man am I? The kind who lets his own daughter believe he's broke while sitting on a fortune. The kind who plays mind games with people who are trying to help him. The kind who doesn't deserve a daughter like Violet. Pike released my shirt and stepped back, straightening his jacket. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Don't make this harder than it has to be. After he left, I sat in my chair for a long time, thinking about what Margaret would have done. She'd always been the strategist in our relationship, the one who could see around corners and plan for contingencies. But she was gone now, and it was time for me to finish what we'd started. I picked up the phone and called Malcolm. It's time, I said. You're sure? Pike just threatened me in my own apartment. He grabbed me, Malcolm. He physically threatened an old man to get his hands on money that isn't his. Did you record it? I looked down at the small device Margaret had insisted I carry everywhere. Every word. Perfect. I'll make some calls tonight. By tomorrow afternoon, this will all be over. One way or another. Ezra, are you ready for what comes next? Because once we do this, there's no going back. Your relationship with Violet may never recover. I thought about my daughter's tears that afternoon, about the fear in her eyes when she talked about Pike's anger. Malcolm, I'm not doing this to punish Violet. I'm doing it to save her. The next morning, I arrived at Malcolm's office to find Pike and Violet already waiting. Pike looked like a man who'd already won. Violet looked like she hadn't slept. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, sweetheart. Let's get this over with," Pike said. "We've got a lot to accomplish today." Malcolm emerged from his inner office with a stack of papers and a grim expression. "Good morning, everyone. Please, come in." We settled around Malcolm's conference table, Pike drumming his fingers impatiently. "Before we begin," Malcolm said, "I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what we're discussing today. Pike, you're requesting that Mr. Whitmore sign over complete power of attorney for his financial affairs, including control of a trust fund worth approximately $2.3 million. That's correct. For his own protection. And your basis for this request is your belief that Mr. Whitmore is no longer competent to manage his own affairs. Look at the evidence," Pike said, pulling out a thick folder. 6 months of confused payments, missed appointments, inability to manage basic household tasks. The man can barely remember where he lives. "I see. And you've documented all of this?" "Extensively." Malcolm nodded thoughtfully. "Violet, what's your position on this?" My daughter looked between Pike and me, clearly torn. I want what's best for my father. If he needs help managing his finances, then yes, I think someone should help him, even if that means he loses all control over his own life." "It's not about control," Pike interjected. "It's about protection. Ezra could be taken advantage of by unscrupulous people." "Unscrupulous people," Malcolm repeated slowly. "I see. Well, before we proceed, I have some information that might be relevant to this discussion." Malcolm opened his own folder and pulled out a photograph. "Pike, can you tell me what this is?" Pike glanced at the photo and shrugged. "Looks like a house. It's the Morrison Victorian. Or what's left of it. Can you tell me what happened to this historic property?" "I renovated it." "You gutted it and removed every architectural detail that made it historically significant. Then you sold it for 3 times its assessed value to an out-of-state buyer. That's called business. And this?" Malcolm showed another photo. Another renovation. The Caldwell farmhouse. Built in 1892, torn down completely and replaced with a McMansion that's currently in foreclosure. Pike was getting uncomfortable. "What's your point?" "My point is that I've been investigating your business practices, Pike. And what I've found is quite interesting." Malcolm spread a series of documents across the table. "These are financial records from your construction company. They show a pattern of using client deposits to fund personal projects. In legal terms, that's called embezzlement." Pike's face went white. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can. I also have records showing that you've been skimming money from Ezra's accounts for the past 4 months. Small amounts, but consistent. You've stolen almost $3,000 from a man you've convinced everyone is senile. That's impossible. Violet handles his accounts. Violet handles the account you set up for him. But Ezra has several other accounts that you didn't know about. Accounts that he's been using to test whether you could be trusted." I watched understanding dawn on Pike's face. Every confused payment, every double payment, every mistake, with bills, it was all a test. "And you failed spectacularly." Malcolm turned to another document. "This is a psychological evaluation of Ezra, conducted last month by Dr. Patricia Vance. She's a geriatric specialist who's been observing him without his knowledge for 3 months. Her conclusion? Quote, Mr. Whitmore shows no signs of cognitive decline or mental incompetence. His occasional confusion appears to be situational rather than systemic, and may be related to grief and stress rather than any underlying neurological condition." Pike stood up abruptly. "This is bullshit. You can't." "Sit down, Pike." Malcolm's voice cut through the room like ice. "Because we're not finished." Pike sat. "Violet, I want you to understand something very important. Your father has been playing chess while your husband has been playing checkers. Every moment of confusion, every sign of decline that Pike documented, it was all performance." Violet's face was a mask of shock and growing horror. "Performance? Your father and your mother spent 2 years preparing for this exact scenario. They saw what Pike was, even if you couldn't. And they set up safeguards." Malcolm pulled out another document. "This is a recording device that your father has been carrying for the past 6 months. It's recorded every conversation, every interaction, every moment of Pike's manipulation and abuse." He pressed play on a small recorder. Pike's voice filled the room. "Cut the confused act. I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you really are." The recording continued, capturing Pike's threats from the night before in crystal clarity. "Violet," Malcolm said gently, "your husband physically threatened your 78-year-old father to gain access to money that doesn't belong to him." My daughter looked like she was going to be sick. "Dad," she whispered, "is this true? Have you been pretending this whole time?" "Not pretending to grieve your mother," I said quietly. "Not pretending to be hurt by what you both did to me, but pretending to be helpless?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because your mother and I knew that someday Pike would show his true colors. And when he did, we wanted to be ready." Pike finally found his voice. "This is entrapment. None of this would hold up in court." "Actually, it would," Malcolm said. "Because we also have evidence of your embezzlement from Brennan Construction, your fraud in the Morrison house sale, and your theft from Ezra's accounts. Judge Harrison has already signed warrants." As if summoned by his name, Judge Harrison walked into the conference room, followed by 2 sheriff's deputies. "Pike Brennan," Judge Harrison said formally, "you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, elder abuse, and theft." Pike looked around the room wildly, as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "Violet, you can't let them do this. I'm your husband." But Violet wasn't looking at Pike anymore. She was looking at me, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, sweetheart. How can you forgive me? I threw you out of your own house. I treated you like you were nothing. Because you're my daughter. And because your mother made me promise to save you from him if I could." Pike was handcuffed now, but he wasn't finished. "You think you've won something, old man? Your daughter hates you now. She'll never forgive you for this humiliation." "Pike," I said, standing up slowly, "you made one crucial mistake." "What's that?" "You assumed that because I'm old, I'm weak. You assumed that because I'm grieving, I'm broken. And you assumed that because I loved my daughter, I wouldn't fight back." I walked over to where he stood between the deputies. "But what you never understood is that a man who's built his own house, raised his own daughter, and loved his wife through 45 years of marriage, that man doesn't break easily." Pike's face twisted with rage. "I gave Violet everything. A future, security, a real life. What did you ever give her?" "I gave her roots," I said simply. "And roots grow back." Judge Harrison nodded to the deputies, and they led Pike away. His shouts echoed down the hallway until the elevator doors closed. Malcolm began gathering the papers scattered across the table. "So what happens now?" Violet asked. "Now," Malcolm said, "we have some decisions to make. Violet, legally speaking, you're not responsible for Pike's crimes. But you are responsible for the decisions you made under his influence." I signed papers giving him access to Dad's accounts. Under duress and false pretenses. "Those documents are void. And the house." Malcolm looked at me. "That's up to your father." Violet turned to me, her face full of desperate hope and fear. "Dad, I know I have no right to ask this, but—" "The house is yours," I said. "What?" "Your mother and I always intended for you to inherit it. The only question was whether you'd inherit it as the generous, loving daughter we raised, or as Pike's accomplice. But I chose Pike. I chose him over you. You chose what you thought was security over what you thought was an increasingly confused old man. That was wrong, but it was understandable." I walked to the window and looked out at the town where I'd spent my entire adult life. "Violet, your mother and I had 67 years together. We raised you. We built a life. We prepared for the future. Did we expect Pike? No. Did we prepare for the possibility that someone might try to manipulate you? Yes. So what now? Now you have a choice. You can keep the house and the trust fund, with some conditions." "What conditions?" Malcolm answered for me. "First, you'll establish a historical preservation fund for Copper Creek to undo some of the damage Pike did to this community. Second, you'll attend counseling to help you process what Pike did to you. And third, you'll move back into the house and take care of your father." "Take care of me? I'm 78 years old, Violet. I may have been pretending to be confused, but I am getting older, and I don't want to spend whatever time I have left alone in that apartment." Violet was crying again, but this time they were tears of relief. "Yes. Yes to all of it. Dad, I want to come home." "Then come home." But our reunion was interrupted by Malcolm's secretary rushing into the room. "Mr. Steele, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something on the news you need to see." She turned on the conference room television, and we watched as a reporter stood in front of Brennan Construction's office building. This is Channel 7 News with breaking coverage of what may be the largest construction fraud in Copper Creek County history. Pike Brennan, owner of Brennan Construction, was arrested this morning on charges of embezzlement and elder abuse. But sources tell us that's just the beginning. The reporter continued, court documents filed this morning reveal that Brennan has been operating what investigators are calling a systematic scheme to defraud elderly homeowners and destroy historic properties for profit. The scheme allegedly involved convincing elderly residents to sell their properties under duress, then gutting historic buildings and selling them to out-of-state investors at inflated prices. I felt a cold satisfaction as the reporter described Pike's network of fraud. But perhaps most shocking is the revelation that Brennan was allegedly manipulating his own father-in-law, 78-year-old Ezra Whitmore, in an attempt to gain access to a multi-million-dollar trust fund. The camera cut to footage of Pike being led away in handcuffs, and then to an interview with someone I didn't recognize. "This is what evil looks like," the man on screen was saying. Pike Brennan wasn't just stealing money. He was stealing people's homes, their histories, their dignity. He destroyed some of the most beautiful architecture in our county, and he did it while pretending to be a pillar of the community. Violet gasped. "Who was that?" Malcolm was smiling grimly. "That's David Caldwell. His family's farmhouse was one of the properties Pike destroyed. I may have given him a call this morning." The news report continued with interviews from other Pike victims, families who'd lost historic homes, contractors who hadn't been paid, elderly residents who'd been pressured into selling properties below market value. And in a twist that sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie, the reporter continued, court documents reveal that Mr. Whitmore, who many believed was suffering from dementia, was actually conducting an elaborate investigation into his son-in-law's activities, working with his attorney to build a case against Brennan. The camera cut to footage of me leaving Malcolm's office earlier, looking every inch the confused old man I'd been pretending to be. Mr. Whitmore declined to comment on camera, but sources close to the case say he spent months documenting Brennan's abuse and manipulation, creating what investigators are calling one of the most thorough cases of elder abuse documentation they've ever seen. Violet stared at the screen. "Dad, you're famous." "I'm old. There's a difference." But the reporter wasn't finished. Perhaps most significantly, the Whitmore family has announced the establishment of the Margaret Whitmore Historic Preservation Fund, which will work to protect and restore historic properties in Copper Creek County. The fund will be administered by Violet Whitmore, Mr. Whitmore's daughter, who was also allegedly victimized by her husband's manipulation. "Wait," Violet said. "How do they know about the preservation fund?" "We just decided that 10 minutes ago." Malcolm's smile was positively smug now. "I may have prepared a press release. Just in case." "You knew we'd decide that?" "I knew your father would find a way to turn this disaster into something positive. It's what your mother would have wanted." The news report concluded with shots of the various historic buildings Pike had destroyed, and a promise to follow the story as it developed. Malcolm turned off the television. "Well," he said, "I'd say Pike's reputation in this town is officially finished." As we walked out of Malcolm's office together, father and daughter again for the first time in 6 months, people on the street stared and whispered, but not with pity anymore. Now they were looking at us with something like awe. "Dad," Violet said as we reached her car, "what do we do now?" "Now we go home. We pack up that miserable apartment. We move your things out of Pike's house, and we start over." Is it really that simple? The best things usually are. As we drove toward my old house, our house, I saw Pike's contractors packing up their equipment. Word traveled fast in a town like Copper Creek. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "When you were sitting in that apartment, playing the confused old man, were you ever really confused? Ever really scared?" I thought about those long nights alone, about the grief that wasn't performance, about the fear that I might lose my daughter forever. "Every single day," I said honestly. "I was terrified that Pike had changed you so much that I wouldn't be able to get you back. But you never gave up. Your mother made me promise I wouldn't." We pulled into the driveway of the house I'd built with my own hands, the house where I'd raised my daughter and loved my wife and planned for a future that Pike had tried to steal. But he'd failed. And as Violet and I walked up the front steps together, I could almost hear Margaret's voice on the wind. "Well done, Ezra. Well done." The town council meeting was packed that Thursday night. Word had spread fast about the Whitmore case, and it seemed like half of Copper Creek had turned out to see what would happen next. Mayor Patricia Vance called the meeting to order. Before we begin regular business, I think we all know why we're here tonight. The events of this past week have shaken our community, and we need to address the damage that's been done. She gestured toward me and Violet, who were sitting in the front row. Ezra and Violet Whitmore have requested to address the council about their plans for the Margaret Whitmore Historic Preservation Fund. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 78 years, but also feeling stronger than I had in months. Thank you, Mayor Vance. I'll be brief. I looked out at the faces in the crowd, neighbors I'd known for decades, people who'd watched me build my house and raise my daughter and bury my wife. 6 months ago, most of you thought I was a confused old man who couldn't take care of himself. And I let you think that, because sometimes the only way to catch a predator is to look like prey. A murmur went through the crowd. Pike Brennan destroyed some of the most beautiful buildings in our county. He stole money, he manipulated families, and he tried to steal my daughter's future. But he failed. I paused, letting that sink in. What I discovered is that when good people stand together, they're stronger than any scheme, smarter than any con artist, and more determined than any predator. Applause started in the back of the room and spread forward. Pike and Malcolm thought they were playing chess while we were playing checkers. But they missed the most important thing. We weren't playing a game at all. We were building a life, protecting a community, and defending the things that matter most. The applause was louder now. The Margaret Whitmore Historic Preservation Fund will work to undo Pike's damage. We'll restore what can be restored. We'll preserve what can be preserved. And we'll make sure that no one else can come into our community and destroy our history for profit. But more than that, we're going to create jobs. Real jobs for local people, not the kind of exploitation Pike specialized in. We're going to train young people in traditional building crafts. We're going to bring back the kind of community where people take care of each other instead of taking advantage of each other. The applause was thunderous now. This isn't about revenge. This is about remembering who we are and protecting what matters. I sat down, and Violet stood up. My name is Violet Whitmore. You probably know me as Pike Brennan's wife, but I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning, and I'm taking back my maiden name. More applause. I want to apologize to this community for my part in what happened. I let myself be manipulated, and I made decisions that hurt people I love. I can't undo that, but I can try to make it right. She pulled out a piece of paper. The Preservation Fund will start with a $2 million endowment. Our first project will be rebuilding the Morrison Victorian exactly as it was, using the original architectural plans and traditional materials. Mrs. Morrison's grandson has agreed to sell it back to the community for what she originally received. The crowd erupted in cheers. Our second project will be restoring the Caldwell farmhouse. The McMansion that replaced it will be torn down, and we'll rebuild the original farmhouse using photographs and family records. More cheers. And our third project will be establishing a community workshop where young people can learn traditional building trades from master craftsmen. Violet folded the paper and looked directly at me. My father taught me that roots grow back. Tonight, we start growing them. The standing ovation lasted 15 minutes. After the meeting, we were surrounded by people wanting to shake our hands, to thank us, to tell us their own stories about Pike's manipulations. Ezra, said Bill Henderson, who owned the hardware store below my former apartment, I owe you an apology. I saw you struggling, and I didn't do anything to help. You did what you could, Bill. No, I didn't. None of us did. We saw an old man in trouble, and we just watched. Well, I said, now you know better. Mrs. Caldwell, the elderly woman whose family farmhouse Pike had destroyed, grabbed my hands with surprising strength. Thank you, she whispered. I thought I'd never see my childhood home again. You will, Violet promised. We'll rebuild it exactly as it was. As the crowd finally thinned out, Mayor Vance approached us. Ezra, I have to ask, how long were you planning this? 2 years. Since Margaret's diagnosis. And you never doubted that it would work? I thought about all the nights I'd lain awake in that tiny apartment, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake, if I was going to lose my daughter forever. Every single day. But Margaret always said that doubt was just fear wearing a disguise. And I wasn't going to let fear win. What happens now? Now we go home and start rebuilding. As we walked home through the town we'd fought so hard to save, I thought about all the battles we'd won and lost, all the times we'd been right and wrong, all the people who'd helped us and hurt us along the way. But mostly, I thought about Margaret and how proud she'd be to see her daughter in the house we'd built together, in the community we'd defended together, surrounded by the love we'd cultivated together. Pike was in prison where he belonged. The community was safe. My daughter was free. Justice had been served. The predator had been defeated. The family had been restored. And Ezra Whitmore, the confused old man who wasn't confused at all, had played the greatest chess game of his life. I drop 2 stories a day. Please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss them. If you enjoyed this story, click on one of the boxes showing on your screen for more. Thank you for listening.